Welcome to the Real Stories channel. Come discover amazing stories. While looking for recyclable bottles and a garbage can, Joachim noticed a group of young people arguing with great spirit a little further away. As he approached, he saw a woman in a beautiful wedding dress stretching wildly with her hands, while next to her was an equally attractive young man in an expensive wedding suit. These are some lucky people, Joachim thought, cocking his head to one side. The homeless man continued his search while an obsessive thought kept turning in his head. Sometimes images would pop into her mind, but they never turned into clear memories. They were more like reflections that were soon covered with the rippling water. The man ended up on the streets by an unfortunate accident, or rather, his life changed so abruptly that it was now unclear where he came from and who he was. The man was like a ghost among people. Joachim had to survive by wandering the streets for several years. Oh, and it was his street friends who came up with his name, Joachim. When he arrived at the shelter, he used to work on a construction site, but he was kicked out without receiving a penny. They even took his documents and threatened that if Joachim went to the police he would only get into more trouble. What happened next was a kind of haze. He remembers being given a drink by some people and taking it, and then waking up in a hospital. The elderly doctor bent over the patient and said, "You were poisoned. The dose was nearly lethal. But you were lucky. Unfortunately, you still have some serious complications. Your gastrointestinal tract is damaged, and your eyesight and hearing are still suffering. In addition, we can also mention partial amnesia. I don't know if your memory will ever come back, but if you keep drinking alcohol, the chance of that happening is practically nil." Numerous medical procedures made Joachim recover, but his memory never returned. He looked like the man who used to have a family, but unfortunately he couldn't remember anything specific like his wife's name or if he had kids. So Joachim had no choice but to get used to living under a false name and without any memory of his previous life. He became a man without a past and therefore without a future as well. His whole life boiled down to very basic needs, like finding something edible and surviving after finishing his daily routine of looking for recyclables in the trash. The homeless man looked at the young people one more time and went to the recycling point he needed to get to before closing to collect the money for his recyclables. He would spend that money on some staples, enough for some bread and maybe some cheese. Sometimes he managed to buy canned fish, which was a real treat. After going to the shelter, Joachim immediately told homeless leader Alexandre, "This is all I have today. I got some bread." "Very good. Go rest. Monica's soup is cooking." "Soon it will be ready," replied Alexandre, looking at the contents of the bag that Joachim brought and some notes in his hands. In response, Joachim went to Monica and silently handed her some chocolates. "This is for you. I saved some money and thought you might like it." "Thanks, darling. You're sweet. What would I do without you?" The woman smiled and ran a hand through Joachim's thick hair. Monica was cooking dinner over an open fire. A little smoke drifted into a makeshift chimney, but most of it filled the room, making everyone. They seemed to be performing some kind of ceremony, but for me, homeless, it was commonplace, as the heat from the smoke was better than the cold air. Monica served soup in cups for her and her friend, sitting next to Joachim. "Why are you so sad? Is it because you couldn't raise enough money?" she asked. "No, I saw a couple of happy newlyweds today and it made me feel sorry for myself. In the end, I feel like I'm in a swamp, where I just sink and can't escape." "Have some soup, Joachim. You're probably hungry and that makes you very worried. Forget everything. You are where you are and they are where they are. Just live your life. Maybe you'll remember something from your past at some point, but you never know." "There's no turning back," said the woman. The man just shrugged his shoulders and replied, "I don't know. I'd really like to remember at least something, and then the rest would fall into place. The scars are hurting again, so the weather will probably change for the worse." Joachim frowned slightly, placing a hand on his cheek. The newlyweds greeted their guests, and after the photo shoot, the groom suggested going to see his parents. Just a minute, I need to remind them of something. Tell me you're not still mad at them, he asked. Averting her gaze to the side, Fernanda responded with restraint, no darling, water under the bridge. It's just that the way they reacted to your decisions just shocked me. I know your parents are against our marriage. Felipe asked the driver to stop near the restaurant. Okay, let's have a drink first. To be honest, I don't understand my family either, but you know they're pretty alternative. I hope everything is going well. Today I'm so tired from all the wedding planning. I thought I would go crazy, but it looks like I've managed to keep my sanity, and now we can finally get our marriage license. I'm so proud of you, my love. Fernanda smiled, even if her relationship with the groom's parents was very strained. Felipe's mother did not approve of her son's choice and did not refrain from expressing her opinion, saying that marriages like this are never happy and that he should choose a woman of his social position. Felipe's father shared the same opinion and even said that he would not attend their wedding. However, Felipe managed to change his parents' opinion after a cocktail. Each of the bride and groom went to the groom's parents after that. Felipe's parents arrived 20 minutes later, while Fernanda was still sitting in the living room trying to remain calm. Felipe was talking quietly with his mother in the kitchen. I'll be fine, son. Your dad and I have prepared a gift for you. I'm sure you'll remember this for the rest of your lives, and you don't need to thank us. It's from the bottom of our hearts and will definitely help create climate, said Mrs. Leal, looking towards Fernanda. Felipe didn't ask what it was and didn't mind being surprised. The attention waned a bit when the groom's mother asked for a private conversation with her daughter-in-law in the kitchen. So Fernanda got ready for the conversation. As you can see, we are not poor and Felipe is our only child. We want him to have a happy family and a solid marriage, the mother-in-law started the conversation. The poor woman thought that she would be scolded again. But this time Mrs. Leal continued gently, we decided not to interfere with your family anymore. I will no longer hide the fact that we didn't like you at first, as we were worried that you only cared about Felipe's money. But we realized as time went on that you're a good person, so don't worry, we won't interfere with the wedding. Besides, we decided to invite an excellent musician to perform at the party, you would like it? The newlyweds got back in the car and went to get ready for the party. Taking care of them, Mrs. Leal called her husband and whispered something in her ear. From the expression on her husband's face, he was really surprised. Apparently, he did not agree with his wife's plan, but he did not dare to contradict her. After dinner, Joachim decided to take a nap. But all of a sudden someone pushed him aside and said, "Hey buddy, looks like you got a side job. They are looking for a musician and you told me you could sing, maybe you could make some money." "Sir, who would be looking for a musician?" synthesized the man, leaving the shelter. Before him, then, appeared a pair of smart, well-dressed people. "Well, do you need a singer? Are there no other artists you could hire? Why resort to the synthesizer?" Joachim asked. Rudy, lies to the well-dressed couple, were Felipe's parents, and that was the gift they decided to give the newlyweds. After all, they promised to pay for a musician, which is exactly what they were about to do. Realizing that she needed to deal with the problem herself, Mrs. Leal took some bills out of his bag. "I hope this money is enough to convince you that we are serious," she thought. The man thought it would be foolish to refuse, even though he knew something was clearly wrong. Soon after, his taxi arrived and Felipe's parents got out of the car, anxious to see the reaction of their son and bride. "We're here," said Mrs. Loyal. "Looks like the address I was told to take you to." The taxi stopped near the wedding ceremony location. "I don't know what you did, but they paid you very well for this trip. I was told to come back in an hour. Good luck to you, I hope you can at least feed here, as it's not clear what else is here happening." Mrs. Leal was waiting for Joachim at the entrance to the restaurant. "Come on, the guests are already waiting. We told them that you would play the guitar and perform live." When Joachim took the stage, The guests were surprised to see that the musician was clearly homeless. Happy expressions were heard throughout the room, but suddenly, without understanding how it happened, Joachim ran his fingers behind his back and transformed into a great musician who started to sing. The room froze in absolute silence as Joachim's voice performed magnificent music. The man did not understand how he knew the words, they simply came out of his subconscious and, along with the words, clear images came to mind: a flowering garden, a dark-haired woman with a little girl in her arms, smiling and waving at him, saying something, but he couldn't make out the words. After the last chord, there were a few seconds of complete silence. Suddenly, the hall erupted in thunderous applause. Joachim's performance was a sensation that no one could imagine that a homeless person could do. Having this much talent could be rewritten as having such exceptional abilities. Joachim suddenly grabbed his face and started to rub his scar, which started to hurt again. Then, Fernanda ran out of the crowd of guests and jumped off the stage screaming, "Daddy, Daddy!" She threw herself on the strange beggar's neck and he hugged his daughter. Suddenly, something turned the key on her head. Now, he could clearly see the image of his family. He had been waiting for this moment for a long time. Fernando looked closely into the homeless man's eyes and said, "I always knew I'd see you again, Dad. Too bad Mom didn't live long enough to see it happen. If it weren't for that scar over her right eye, I wouldn't have recognized it." You? Joachim learned from his daughter that his wife, whose name was Livia, had died in an accident, but she never stopped believing that her husband Gustavo would return home one day. Sadly, it has been 7 years since he disappeared and many of his relatives have completely lost faith that they would ever see him again. Leaving the guitar aside, it was no longer Joachim, but Gustavo. He took his daughter's face in his warm hands and said, "Thank you, my girl. Thank you for not giving up hope of seeing me again. I had problems and lost my memory for a long time. All these years, I was trying to remember who I was and where I came from. This gift of yours, who did you want to humiliate with it? Me, Fernanda, or Gustavo?" Felipe yelled at his parents in a rage. "As you can see, nothing went right for you. Your cruel plan turned out to be good, not great. Now, all you have to do is apologize to all of us." By this time, the groom's parents had nothing to do but admit their mistake and ask the newlyweds for forgiveness. The wedding party continued despite the misunderstanding, the guests even asking Gustavo to sing a few more songs. Some time later, Fernanda took her father to her mother's grave. The gray-haired man looked at the inscription carved into that pale stone and couldn't hold back his tears. There was no going back in time and nothing could bring his family back. But Gustavo was deeply grateful for what he had. In the end, he managed to discover his identity and find his daughter, which made him the happiest man in the world. A few days later, he filled a bag with food and went to visit his friends at the homeless shelter. They discussed Joachim's story for a long time and everyone looked forward to the day when each of them would receive their own miracle. Gustavo left the shelter for good, but he never forgot the friends he made there.